Um, Good afternoon to everyone. I'm really honored and pleased that you could all be with us today here in the room and also online. It's a really important period for us at Digico. We understand that the European Year of Skills is a great opportunity to drive an era of enablement. And that's really why we're here in the room and online, to have a think and discuss how to ensure we can drive the enablement that's needed globally, but are very much focusing on Europe, to help us help all those that are in need most to be able to get the skills they need to thrive in society. And as we look at empowering and ushering an era of enablement, I also want you to think about, when from a digital perspective, or even cast your minds back to the first time that you engaged with a digital device. Who remembers that kind of slight unnerving experience of the first click of a computer that you ever used? You kind of remember that, probably a little while back. But that, for me, is something that I want us to hold in mind as we think about how that initial uncertainty that we have all experienced before is carried into an increasingly digital world with new devices, new apps, new products, new tools that we need to be able to thrive in society today. A significant number of citizens face this daily, that level of uncertainty. The elderly, the economically disadvantaged, the differently abled, those that are individuals that find themselves in vulnerable situations, that don't have the skills they need to be able to thrive in this society. And especially those that feel on the periphery of an increasingly digital world. It's a bit ironic, actually. We have a well-intentioned sort of goal towards sort of rapid digitalization, but at the same time, we're at risk of exacerbating or creating a larger level of illiteracy, right, which is digital illiteracy. So I'll introduce myself, might be useful. I'm Gori. So I'm the founder, co-founder of the Digital Collective. And for me, this is a particularly exciting year. I've been working in the area of digital skills for probably actually quite a bit over a decade now, very much trying to work with policymakers, educators, private and public institutions to try and find ways to drive the message of tackling and bridging the skills gap across society. So I'm actually really delighted. I'm excited that this year of skills has been pushing skills into the spotlight, especially basic skills. At the Digital Collective, we're super enthusiastic about the opportunities that we think this year is going to bring, and we really want to, as a collective, bring people together to focus on digital skills as a minimum competence, right? A minimum competence requirement for contemporary life, learning, and for work. This is an incredibly ever-evolving world, and the skills that we talk about, the basic digital skills that we talk about, aren't just a luxury or a privilege. We think of them as a right, akin to writing or reading. And we need to really consider that as we think about how do we usher in this era of enablement as well. Every aspect of our lives is, or I say hinges on digital competencies. Whether it's accessing information, securing your personal data, accessing public services, all of these are incredibly important, and the competencies we need to be able to engage is how we will thrive, let alone even survive, in this digital world that we live in right now. But we know there's certain individuals that struggle to match the strides of this digital evolution. So this year, it's critical that we address these basic skills. And we find a collective effort to be able to support this movement that we know the European Commission and many partners are pushing for in this day and age. So being in the room, we all know it matters to you. But I do genuinely challenge you, whether you're an educator, a tech entrepreneur, a policymaker, someone who runs a non-profit organization, to ensure that we don't leave any individuals behind in this digital revolution. We've got to remember that digital skills, like every other skill, begins at grassroots. And we can't navigate the digital world without understanding the basics. operating device, connected to the internet, the things that we understand are necessary to be able to live and thrive in this world. So it's important for us to think about, how do we disrupt? How do we redefine? How do we refocus on basic digital literacy during this European Year of Skills, to make sure we're not just staying apace with the change, but we're ensuring inclusivity, accessibility, making sure every voice can be heard, and collectively progressing towards a future where we leave no one behind. So I welcome you again to this event, and I'm incredibly excited to have you here. You know, throughout this event, we'll be prioritizing basic skills. We'll be talking about an integrated approach that includes basic digital skills, and call for a return to the focus of basic digital skills within the Year of Skills, but more importantly, within the EU skills agenda. And we know it's been elevated. We want to continue to build the visibility on this so that we truly don't leave anybody behind. And that true skills revolution will bring more equity, will bring more inclusion, and ensure that we can move forward together as a society. But we want to put the words into action. So the outcome of this event will see us publish a white paper. This paper will gather insights from everything that we've learned today, from discussions that we're having, and discussions we've had so far online, to propose recommendations on the best ways to approach training of basic digital skills with equity and inclusion at its core. We previously published a paper that talks about the state of play, and we detailed the insights so far that we've gathered. And if any of you haven't seen it so far, it is available on our website. We have published it at the launch of the Year of Skills, which was May the 9th. And please review this if you can, because we want more input, feedback, and comments on what we've discussed so far. What we're going to cover today. So first and foremost, we will have a conversation. Hopefully you can still hear me online. Yes? Hope so. If not, I'll get told. So we split it into three parts today, right? First part is about a conversation online with a European Commission member. And we'll talk a bit about where basic skills stands in the European Year of Skills from their point of view. We'll also have a fireside chat. We're going to bring AI into the conversation. So we'll have a fireside chat with an expert that's going to talk a bit about how AI will contribute to bridging the skills gap. And then finally, last but not least, we'll have a session on the European and global best practice for tackling basic digital skills. Then we'll have a closing remarks, and throughout the session, we'll have space for people to ask questions at every section. So please do have a think of the kind of questions that you have in mind, and also make them related to yourself or related to your business or where you work at the moment. And after the 2 hours, for some people, the bit that I'm sure you're going to all be waiting for, we'll have a networking drinks and reception in the room. Fortunately not for you that are online. Bit of housekeeping for those that are in the room. Fire escapes are just out the door to the left, so please follow the signs. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if one does go off, it's real, and we do have to exit. There are posters for Wi-Fi. If you can see this, there should be some around the room. If you're not already connected, please ask one of the DigiCo staff to help you. But we do invite you to participate, both online and in the room, using the QR code that we have both on your badges or that you'll see on screen that we will share when we kick off the event more formally. And we use that to ensure that you can ask questions in the Q&A, that you can also participate in some of the Slido activities that we will be sharing as we go through the event. And that hopefully helps us have a way to capture and address your questions. That caught me off guard. I wasn't ready for that one. So we genuinely do invite you all to participate. It's really important that we can get the conversation going. So please use the Slido to ask questions throughout the conversation, throughout the day. And we will get to them as we go. Hopefully we can do so in a timely fashion. And there you'll see is the code. So we're going to kick it off. We're going to test your digital skills, first and foremost, see if you can access this properly. And what I wanted to do is get a bit of an understanding, or a more comprehensive understanding about what the Year of Skills means to you. And even more importantly, what skills do we feel require most urgent attention and more investment in the year of skills? So the first question that I want to ask is about the year of skills and what you feel are the skill sets that require most investment. So have a little think. It could be anything. It could be, there's no right or wrong answer. I want you to have a think about whether it's more specific skills, whether it's particular technologies that you think it needs to be a focus for this current year of skills. Maybe it's an area that you work in that you think is very important. Maybe it's a level of skill that you think they should be a focus on. So I want you to have a think about this. And as we do, and I'm going to give you another few seconds to have a think. As we do, I'm actually going to jump straight in and show you our video, which is a video that talks a bit about what Digico are doing and the size of the challenge that faces us and how you can really get involved in this. Whilst the video is playing, it'll still be open. The slider will still be open. So please feel free to keep feeding in your thoughts on, and that's also for you online. Please feed in your thoughts into the Slido. And then following the video, we'll bring it on screen to get a feel for what kind of skills, what level of skills, what specific technologies people feel that should be focused on during the year of skills. Let's play the video.
Meet Samid. Meet Fatima. Meet Anna. Different stories, different dreams, the same reality. They do not have the basic digital skills to get a job. Did you know, in Europe, 4 out of 10 adults are digitally vulnerable. They have low or no digital skills at all, being socially and economically excluded. 90% of jobs will require at least basic digital skills in the next years. 2023 is the European Year of Skills. Even though digital skills is one of the priorities of the European Union, the most disadvantaged groups are generally left behind. We need to act now. As technologies evolve, this divide is expected to grow exponentially. We need to focus on access. Not everyone can access tech devices, use, and profit from them. COVID-19 widened this divide. Vulnerable individuals. Digital exclusion goes hand in hand with social exclusion. So, we need a plan, a regional action plan, so that by 2030, at least 80% of all adults have basic digital skills. A future in which everyone is included. Join Digico. The digital collective advocates for radical digital inclusion in Europe. Our mission is to close the growing digital skills divide and empower those who need it most. How do we do this? We do so by driving the digital inclusion movement and amplifying the social impact of organizations across Europe. Who do we partner with? We're building an ecosystem to drive collective action. We need to go back to basic digital skills. We need to adopt a targeted approach. Are you in? Let's align efforts and solve this problem collectively. Join the collective. Join Digico.
Cool, thank you. As you can see, this is a real movement for us. You know, it's a real focus for us to try and drive a collective movement towards this. But, as you've probably been waiting for, we've had you collect all your thoughts around the skills that we feel are most important for the year of skills. So, if we want to put it on screen, and let's have a look and see what people's thoughts were. Great, so it's great to see what we think are the focus areas. And at the core of this, we've got critical thinking, we've got basic skills, which, as we've talked a lot about, are really important for us to focus on. You know, there is a lovely range here. You know, very, very basic skills are in there. Reading, literacy, lifelong learning, learning to learn. I think that's a fantastic one. I think learn to learn is really important, especially in this day and age of people wanting to need to learn fast and learn quickly to be able to gather what they need to thrive. Cyber awareness, cyber skills are in there. Online safety, transversal skills, which are really important. I think this is really, really key, and this is important for us to be able to see what the focus should be as we step into this year of skills. Now, thank you very much for participating in that word cloud, and for those that fed into it in the room. We're now going to move on to the next section, and the next section is all about understanding where, from a European Commission perspective, they are creating a space where we can all participate in this year of skills. So it's absolutely my pleasure, my honor, to bring on board Ana Carrero, who will be here to talk about what the European Commission are doing in the year of skills and how we can also get involved. Following that, I will be able to have a Q&A with her and then hopefully open the floor for some questions as well. So, over to you, Ana Carrero. Can I get a round of applause? I think it's a good place to start.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Does it work? Yes? Okay. Well, thanks a lot for inviting me and for your engagement, because you are already contributing to the European Year of Skills by raising awareness and organizing events and making it happen. So basically, let's see if it works. Yes. Okay. So you may already know that 2023 and 2024 will be the year of skills from 9th of May until next year, the 8th of May. So it was launched 1 month ago, basically, but it was announced in September by President von der Leyen. And the context, the announcement comes in a context where we are facing a lot of shortages in the labor market. So companies are finding more and more difficult to hire the people with the right talent. We are also seeing that adult participation in learning is very low, is 37%. This is the latest statistics that we have. But for the low skilled, it's even lower, it's 18%. And we also know, when talking about digital skills, that most of the jobs require digital skills, but companies are finding it difficult also to have the workforce with the digital skills that they need. I think, well, 50%, 54% of the adult population have basic digital skills, so we are far from the 80% target. So in this context, we also need to take into consideration that we have social targets, and this comes also into the picture. And what we want to achieve with these social targets that stem from the European Pillar of Social Rights is to have 78% of the population working in employment, 60% of adults participating in training every year. And there we also have a sub-target on basic digital skills, the 80% that we were talking about. And we want also to reduce poverty by 15 million by 2030. So you put everything together, and that is why we thought that it was high time to have the focus on skills, because skills are important not only to ensure the 60% of adults participating in training, but also the 78% adults in employment, and also to reduce poverty. So basically what we want in this year is to change the mindset towards upskilling and reskilling. So everybody thinks this is the new norm, and we get as many people as possible engaged in training every year. And also we want to focus on implementation, because at EU level we have put a lot of initiatives on the table in terms of council recommendations, tools, EU funding, and now we really want member states and stakeholders to focus on implementing those. So in this context, our objectives during the year are 4, basically. We want more and better investment, and we want also inclusive investment. I underline this because it focuses on the labor market, but we also want it to be inclusive. We want skills to be relevant, so in order to do that, we need the right skills intelligence. We need to work with the relevant stakeholders and with social partners to identify the right skills, also to design the right training programs. And because we think people are important, we need to match their aspirations with the labor market needs. Also to seize the opportunities of the digital and green transitions, but also with a focus on some disadvantaged groups, like needs, like people farther away from the labor market, the low skilled, and we also want to activate more women. And the last but not least objective is about attracting talent from abroad and investment in their talent development, because we see that we have lower and lower levels of unemployment nowadays, and we're still lacking these talents. So we also want to explore other possibilities. So having said so, we need everybody on board to make this happen. We, of course, are working on raising awareness with communication campaigns, events, and so on at EU level, not only the Commission, but other EU institutions. But we need member states, of course, at all levels, public authorities, training providers, social partners, NGOs, and so on, to really fully implement and identify bottlenecks at a national, regional, and local level. Existing platforms like this one, of course, are essential partners to share what they think and push policy action towards certain directions, and international actors with whom we cooperate on a regular basis. So there were already some initiatives planned that we think are key for the European Year of Skills, and some of them have already been launched. Here you see our planning for 2023. So in Q1, we already had some initiatives on place-based skills, for instance, the one on harnessing talent in regions. We have some initiatives linking industrial policy with the skills needed for the green transition. And here I would make reference to the Green Deal Industrial Plan and the proposal for Net Zero Industry Act, where skills are really one of the key dimensions. And in April, well, we have our colleague from DG Act that knows best, but there was a package on digital education and skills where we proposed as Commission two Council recommendations, one on key enabling factors for successful digital education and training, and another one on improving the provision of digital skills in education and training. And together with that, there was the announcement of the launch of the pilot of the European Digital Skills Certificate and the launch of the Cybersecurity Skills Academy. And then for the rest of the year, we have other things upcoming on learning mobility, on traineeships, and also linked to third country nationals. And the objective of attracting this talent, we are preparing an initiative on a talent pool, and also on recognition of professional qualifications of third country nationals. And maybe you had the chance to follow the launch of the year that was a month ago with a Skills Festival that was web streamed, very lively and dynamic, having people from many member states at all levels and showcasing their skills development experiences. But we are having a flagship event from tomorrow and after tomorrow here in the square, very, very close to these premises, where we will discuss more technical aspects. We will discuss how to value skills. We will discuss recognition. We will discuss skills-first approaches, digital skills, skills for the green transition, and some innovative approaches on how to account for skills investments in accounting practices. So I encourage you all to tune in. The event will be hybrid, and I'm sure we will hear many interesting insights. And later during the year, we will have the VET Week, as every year, where we will put the spotlight on vocational education and training and how it triggers many opportunities in terms of learning and career pathways, particularly for the digital and green transitions. And the Employment and Social Rights Forum, where digital skills and AI will have a very prominent role. So that's it from me. Just to remind you how to get involved, we have a website with a lot of information and toolkit on communication. We have a map where you can reflect your initiatives, your events. We have news on everything that's happening. and we need you on board. So you feed our website, but you also trigger discussions at your level as a stakeholder, as a training provider or a policymaker at national, regional, or local level. So you continue raising awareness and try to make progress at your level in skills development to attain a more competitive Europe, but also a more inclusive Europe where everybody can participate in the economy and in society. So that's it from me. I'm ready to take any question.
Thank you so much, Anna. And can I just get a round of applause for her introduction? Thank you. We'll take a seat as well. Perfect. And now we'll move into a Q&A, and I've got a few questions to start off with. And then following that, we will also have our Q&A in our Slido. So please, as I'm asking the questions, please ensure that you can add your questions into our Q&A, and then hopefully we'll see them pop up as we go. You check your thing is on as well. Just have to flick it upwards. Yes, that's the one. Perfect. Brilliant. So thank you very much for talking us through the work that the European Commission has invested in over the last sort of year or so to prepare for the European Year of Skills. You know, at the Digital Collective, for us, it's incredibly important that we look at basic skills and actually basic digital skills as one of the core minimum competencies needed or even a prerequisite before starting into any other specialized sort of skill space. And for us, it's really important that we understand how this feeds into the work that you're doing and how it is a focus and provides an easy access starting point for individuals to go on their journey to get the skills they need to thrive in the workplace. You mentioned as you were talking through the sort of focus areas for the European Year of Skills, and one of the stats you talked about was that 18% participation levels within learning and adult learning, especially for those with low skills, is alarming. It's definitely not where we want it to be, and we want to make sure that we can improve those numbers. So one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you, when we think about the Year of Skills, and you've talked a lot about job relevancy and access to the labor market, and knowing that you do try to go beyond that, how do we ensure that the European Commission can focus on that basic level, that tackling the adult learning percentage that is so low for those with basic skills? What are the European Commission doing to ensure that we don't leave anybody behind, right? That we make it more as accessible and inclusive as possible to help people on that path where we know that's particularly difficult for them.
Okay. Well, as I was telling you, the Year of Skills focuses on the labor market, but that doesn't mean that it's not comprehensive or broad, as it has also among its objectives to have investments that makes access to skills inclusive and also matching people's aspirations with this focus on people that are more disadvantaged or low skilled. But I work in DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. So of course we are doing a lot to ensure that no one is left behind. And this we do basically through our funding tools. We have the European Social Fund Plus, where more than 2 billion have been invested on digital skills development. And the European Social Fund, although it's not restricted only to low-skilled or people the farther away from the labor market, it does have a strong focus on those. 20% at least of the investments need to be focused on social inclusion, and these social inclusion measures usually mean that you have integrated pathways, meaning that you target an outreach to people that are most disadvantaged because of different circumstances, one being low skilled, try to identify them, and before starting with a targeted training on a labor market, a very specific program, you start by some initial measures to engage them, to give them the grounds to start this learning journey, and by providing guidance and accompanying them throughout the process. So there we are investing a lot, and digital skills are obviously part of it. I can give you maybe an example. We have a program that was awarded a couple of years ago in Spain, Empleando Digital, like digitally employment, developed by two NGOs, Red Cross and the Roma Foundation in Spain, where they had a very ambitious objective of giving digital skills, basic digital skills, but also advanced digital skills in sort of micro-credentials to people in a disadvantaged situation. And they first started by training their trainers and counselors, and then reaching out to these people, of course, with integrated programs that cater for their specific needs and more intense accompanying measures. So we have many of these examples, and we can always do more, but we are trying our best.
No, I think that's fantastic to hear the examples that you've shared. Trying to mix basic digital skills in a similar program with advanced skills always feels a bit complicated, but we know, especially with the micro-credentials, that you need to get people motivated to start on the journey. So what you're doing is having people visualize the pathways they can take, and then give them ways to be able to go a bit more advanced when necessary through the micro-credentials. I think it's fantastic, and it's great to hear that the European Commission is also looking at the European Social Fund to provide more access to non-profits or other organizations that can invest or at least get that funding to build those pathways. I know that the collective for us is very important, that we elevate those funding opportunities and try to get people working together and sharing knowledge about how they can create programs that help more individuals that need those basic digital skills to get the pathways into that area as well. So thank you very much for that. And I think one of the other sort of big sort of focus areas for us is when we think about competencies and we think about frameworks that allow people to understand what they need to learn. We know that there is a fairly well-known framework called DigComp. And DigComp is a framework, if you're not familiar with it, is a digital competencies framework that was launched by the European Commission back in 2013. And the focus of this is to be able to give guidance as to the areas of skills and the levels of skills that people need to have to be able to participate and thrive in society at the moment. We know there's a huge sort of lack of representation for individuals below the foundational level, right, who don't have the literacy that they need to have to be able to participate even in kind of moving themselves up the levels of digital competencies, who lack the understanding of basic digitalization, right? So what does it mean to be able to use a computer or access, typical government services that perhaps might be online, filling out a form, for example. So at the collective for us, we understand that underrepresentation of those individuals and the lack of visibility about those is really key. So I think one of the things that I'd like to understand, especially around the frameworks that exist, is how do we find a way to include those with the low or no basic digital skills and their needs within frameworks like this to help people on that journey to know that they can get to a stage where they can reach a level of competency that is required in the workplace today?
Well, one needs to understand also that these frameworks are a standard, and they are targeting policymakers and training providers to build their programs. So they intend to be comprehensive, but there will always be something that it's not reflected. You will always find something. But so far, it has proved quite successful. Many member states and regions and training providers have adopted this digital competence framework to build their programs. So it doesn't mean that they just take it. No, they need to think how they want to reflect it and how they want to build their policies and their programs. And many, according to my colleagues who are experts in the field, have successfully integrated the level 0 or the skills, the foundational skills you need to start later learning these basic digital skills. We could talk about specific examples. For instance, in Emilia-Romagna, there was a program called Pan Internet, I think it's called, whereby they reflected the DigComp framework, but they also addressed these foundational skills to reach these basic digital skills. or Fit for Internet in Austria. It seems that it also reflects this dimension. But we have many other projects that not necessarily use DigComp, this digital competence framework, but they do address foundational skills to achieve basic digital skills, either through other EU funds like Erasmus+. We fund a lot of innovative projects through its calls, but also through the innovative calls that we fund with EC. It's another instrument that we have in DG Employment, and that used to fund also some innovative approaches for the implementation of upskilling pathways, which is the recommendation that we have in place to achieve basic digital basic skills in general, but including digital, of course.
Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, we're very familiar with a couple of those, especially the Austrian case, because we know that within that member state there was a very active and influential partner that really focused on building the DigiComp 2.2, I believe it was, and the Fit for Internet group really built an element of the competency framework that would allow for those with low or no skills and what they needed to do to get onto that first step, right? What are the really basic skills to make you feel confident, comfortable, but also motivated to kind of go on that journey as well. So it's great to see that that is considered within the way they work with partners around frameworks, which is really important. And you know, thankfully you mentioned about the upskilling pathways, which I think was a really you know, interesting and what we find quite an exciting recommendation. You know, we look at it as a bit of an initiative, but it's a recommendation that really helps to understand, you know, or better understand how do we support that 1/5 of adults, European adults, that struggle with basic reading and writing, calculations, and just digital tools in everyday life. So when that recommendation was put into place, the the upskilling pathways, it was 2016, I think is when that was first launched. What I wanted to know is, are there any other programs or recommendations off the back of that you feel need to be elevated more, that people should need to know about, to inspire more players, partners, you know, in the space, to really focus on those that have very low literacy levels?
Well, I would like to say first that upskilling pathways is still in force, so we still want, and they still want, member states to implement this and to work on upgrading these basic skills of adults through this methodology that was very well thought through. In the meantime, of course, we had some pilot projects and so on that maybe those they came to an end. Very recently, we published a study on how this worked on the ground, and although there were a lot of projects and initiatives put forward to develop this approach, we found that the change was not systemic, that it was relying a lot on EU funding, but it had not been fully integrated and successfully integrated in the systems in the member state. An evaluation of the Commission will be soon published, and it will have a lot of food for thought in this respect for policymakers, for practitioners, to see inspiring practices, but also to acknowledge what went wrong and where we still want to work. But in the meantime, of course, we have put also the spotlight on other initiatives that are complementary. You know, last year, 2 other Council recommendations were adopted, one on individual learning accounts and another one on micro-credentials. Both go in the direction of reaching this 60% of adults participating in training every year. So really encouraging member states to upscale their efforts in this area. And even though they are broader, their scope is broader than upskilling pathways, they also focus on the inclusion aspect, because there are elements in their frameworks that really go in that direction. Like the individual learning accounts is about proposing giving entitlements to individuals, to empower individuals to train every year. So everybody would have a right, regardless of their employment situation, to get on training. And but to set the right framework, we propose to have guidance, a registry with quality training, paid leave, to be able to engage in the training. So there are elements in the proposal that was later adopted that try to ensure this element of inclusion, and the same applies for micro-credentials, because being by definition short training courses are also more adapted to the objective or re-engaging people into training, and also getting very specific and targeted knowledge to be able to get back to the labor market or to reskill, not to be left behind. So we are still working on it in different ways, and we now need to encourage member states to fully implement those.
Thank you so much. Look, I'm even more excited to hear about the way you're bringing in flexibility into learning, right? To make sure it's more accessible for those that either don't have the time, and hence why micro-credentials are so powerful, because it's based on working around your time, but shorter sort of pathways to get there. But also at the same time, you know, I feel a lot of member states have really taken on board this opportunity to kind of, you know, integrate into their member state a program that is fit for them, right? And I think that's one of the things that you know, we truly admire about the European Commission, which is that you create programs or initiatives or recommendations that are implementable at member state level, and they can take and adapt and run with it there as well. So I think it's great to see that that's being done, and glad and very looking forward to the report that's being produced from Upskilling Pathways, because I'm sure that will, as you said, get the brain cogs moving and thinking more about this. I'm being nudged that we're going to be running out of time soon, but we have quite a few questions coming through, so thank you so much for asking your questions, and hopefully we can get them answered. Do we have time for one question before we run in? Fantastic, cool. So I'm just going to pick one of the questions, so apologies if I don't get to yours, for those that have added it already. The first question that we have is, how can we help employers to make it more easy to make learning basic digital skills, or basic skills, part of their daily work? What would be your recommendation around that?
My recommendation to employers or to member states? Well, I mean, here the big employers don't have that issue. I mean, they have big departments, HR, where they can develop their training programs without any problem. The problem here are the small and medium companies that may not have the means nor the knowledge or awareness that they need to get their workers trained. And in order to do that, we would really need public authorities, but also social partners, chambers of commerce to get involved and provide the right means and framework for them to first to be aware, and then to be encouraged to take up these training opportunities via compensations or tax incentives or so on. In some countries like Germany or Austria, we see that chambers, they really get together and provide common training facilities for these SMEs. So there are many examples that could be explored in this respect, but I agree it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, we understand there's a lot of individuals in organizations, employees, that don't have the basic skills to be able to function and do what's required from the modern need in the modern workplace. But employees need to also have the mindset shift. And you talked a lot about mindset before. So I do believe if those Chamber of Commerce, the member states can really find a way to make it clear that this is a lifelong learning approach, especially within the workplace, and people can understand the power of learning-based digital skills, I think would be really important from a productivity perspective, but also from a well-being perspective from the work that you deliver as well. So just conscious of time, obviously, so I'm going to say thank you very much to Ana Carrero, and she is the Deputy Head of Unit, if you're not aware, of DG Employment as part of the European Commission, and we're very thankful to have you here and to have your time to talk us through what the European Commission is doing and how they want to bring us all involved on the journey on the European Year of Skills. So thank you very much to Ana Carrero.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Silvano, and Silvano will be running a fireside chat with, and I won't take it away from you, Silvano, so I'm just going to hand straight over to you, and then you can introduce from there. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. How are you all doing? Good? Thank you for being here. For those of you who are in the room, for those of you who are joining us online, this is Let's Bring Digital Skills Back into the European Year of Skills, and we're very happy to have you on this event. I will take the chance to encourage you to get into our interactive platform, either through the QR that's on your badges if you're here in the room with us, or if you're joining us online, you can scan it on screen. The Q&A is open, so we're very much looking forward to knowing all your thoughts, ideas, and questions around this. For this fireside chat, we have a very special guest joining us. Gerardo Franco is the philanthropy lead for Western Europe at Microsoft. Welcome, Gerardo. Following on our last panel, we know that this European Year of Skills is a great opportunity for us to address the importance of basic skills and basic digital skills to ensure no one is left behind in Europe. When we address this ongoing skills revolution, we thought it was important to address what we think is the biggest elephant in the room, in every conference room at the moment, which is artificial intelligence. We know that there's a hype and a buzz around AI at this moment, and that exploded over the last few months. Everyone is talking about it. And if we want to address this, and I would like to know your thoughts, Gerardo, on this, is AI going to completely change the way in which we interact with digital technology? Do you think it came here to stay? You think it's just a phase? What are your thoughts on that? Is it on?
Sorry, there. Sorry. I was expecting a fireplace for a fireside chat.
And a
Not
wine.
all this high tech. Yeah, wine. So that's a very good question. I think most of the hype around it, it's because if you think about it, it took about 16 years to get 100 million users of mobile phones. Took about 7 years to get 100 million internet users. 5 years to get 100 million Facebook users, and less than 90 days to get 100 million ChatGPT users. So that's what the hype is about. AI has been around for a long time already, in obviously more primitive forms, but the hype is in the acceleration of the technology and how it's infused. It's so easy to use it. That's what makes it, I mean, it's a tool for democratization. I can't say it. It's a democratizing tool because it brings to anyone's fingertips the ability to unlock the power of the technology. You go on ChatGPT or Bing, Chat, etc., and you type, you have a conversation with the most mundane language with AI, and you unlock the power of the technology. That's what makes it both a great opportunity and a very scary, what's happening with the world moment. The reality, though, is also AI is like the calculator was, years ago. So it's just a machine, and like Isaac Asimov said, a robot is a machine that's just trying to imitate a human being. It's the same for AI. It's trying to imitate us. So it's a very powerful tool. Tools can be used for good or bad. We know that, so we need to be responsible in how we use them, but it is just a tool. Will it change everything we do? Likely, yes. I mean, that's my take.
Honesty.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's so many things. Like when the ATMs came out in 1970s, people thought the banking profession would be over because you have a machine that does it for you. And yet that spurred the expansion of bank agencies across the globe because you needed less people to run an agency, but you could cover more territory. When the internet came out, we thought of the webmaster role. That is now a social media manager, content manager, web development manager, SEO content manager. There's one thing leads to another. So yes, transformation for sure. And even today, I mean, that's harking to the past, but today an interior designer is no longer an interior designer. I mean, yes, there is, but then there's all these other roles like 3D, designer within the profession of interior designer. Furniture, whatever, visualizer. I don't know the terms. I mean, I don't do that.
It's a AA panel, not.
I know,
design.
but the point is, yes, it will probably change things in ways we can't imagine today, because it's too soon. But the speed is definitely there.
Exactly, and when we mention the speed, when you're moving fast, you sometimes get scared. And if you look around and with this hype that we have all around about AI, threatening a little bit or calling up to transform the way in which we see things, in which we interact with technology, in which we find jobs, in which we execute jobs, there's a fear that AI can have an impact on the labor market. And you were mentioning that before. Is there an opportunity on it? If we take a look back, for example, to the Industrial Revolution, you gave examples in the 90s, mine is a little bit far away, it had the same fear and it ended up creating more jobs than actually the ones that it lost. So do you think that AI can influence the job market in terms of opportunities, in terms of challenges? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, anyone can tell you that jobs will be lost for sure. It's creative destruction, I think. But if you look at the World Economic Forum, they predicted that, you know, yes, bad news, there'll be 75 million jobs that will be wiped out. But good news is there's going to be 133 million that will be created. And the thing is, we have our mindsets. So we think whenever there's an invention, we go through what we call diligence effect. It's like you apply today's rules and your way of thinking to that invention. But true innovation takes time to find its way in the world. And we don't know how it will find its way. But when it does, those rules that you were living by don't matter anymore. It's kind of like the first online trainings came in PDF form. Remember those? It was like hundreds of pages of PDFs. And we're talking skilling today. So that is key. Nowadays, you can no longer fathom saying this is digital skilling strategy and give someone a 100-page PDF. But that's because we were used to books and we said, well, digital PDF, here you go. That's no, I mean, it doesn't work that way. So jobs of tomorrow will definitely be different, but we need to keep in mind that what AI does is take away repetitive tasks and replace them or allow the human being to have a high value activity. So when you think about, you can even go back to prehistoric times, right? If you were a Neanderthal or whatever came before us, I know there were 5 types of sapiens. Don't ask me. I just know that one and then us, Homo sapiens. Anyway, so they would take hours and hours finding food and, you know, and just digesting it. And then fire came and then you could do it, you know, you could cook food and you could reduce time of digestion, etc. There are primates today that still spend 8 to 10 hours collecting food. So when AI comes and frees up time from repetitive and dull tasks, it's an opportunity to reskill and upskill and to do something that adds value to your life, to society, etc. So yeah, I think definitely there's going to be changes. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know which ones exactly. I know we've talked about this before. The second and third industrial revolutions affected blue-collar jobs. This fourth one, led by AI, will definitely impact white-collar jobs as well. Why? Because many data entry jobs might be impacted if AI can do it better. But then again, ask yourself, is that what I want to do? Like, spend hours entering data on Excel? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that's anyone's dream job.
That's true. That's true. I understand. And when you were mentioning this creative destruction as a possibility, I think it touches one of the most important points that we like to address at DigiCo as an organization and with all of the members of our community. We know the new jobs will be created and we know that other jobs will be lost. And I think it creates an opportunity for us to address the problem of the divide that will be created between those who lose their jobs and those new jobs that will be opened, but people won't have the right skills to address them. So this is a key point for me to invite everyone to participate again. Remember that with the QR codes on your badges, online, enter into slido.com with the hashtag DigiCo, you can use our next poll. And this will bring me to a question that I would like to ask to you all in terms of the impact of AI into the digital divide. To what extent do you think that AI can narrow the digital divide? So if we can get the image on screen, exactly. This is the question, and you have some options that you can reply in terms of how do you think AI can impact the digital divide. And while you take the chance to enter and to react to our next question, I would like to remind all of us that at this particular moment, 42% of Europeans lack the digital skills they need to find a job and to participate actively in society. with this potential AI boom that it's coming, and it can create challenges and opportunities for both students and trainers to understand how they need to move forward to gain the proper skills they need to address this new job creation and to satisfy the new job losses that will be coming to the market. How can AI itself help improve teaching and learning experiences and empower individuals with basic digital skills, Gerardo?
Well, I am going to answer that, but I did want to say that that seems so big, and I would try to unpack it into 3 things that we can do. Address computer science education, first, young people, then address the needs of workers today for reskilling and upskilling, and third, but not least, is all those people that are not in those 2 categories, which is basically people from non-traditional backgrounds, underserved populations, people that are left on the wayside because they don't feel the characteristics of what we're supposed to look like or act like. Those underserved populations need special attention as well. And so how do we use AI for that? Look, it's all very new, right? I mean, I don't have the answers. We're trying to find things out and work with community to make sure that we get to a place where we can address these needs. But one thing that I know for sure is that AI can definitely help create more personalized training for everyone, each and every person. And when I was mentioning freeing up time for educators, for anyone, it applies to educators as well. The ideal, I think, education system is when you have a one-on-one with someone, right? Because the bigger the classes, I'm from Mexico. I came from classes of like 40 to 60 people per class in primary school. You get 0 attention, honestly. I mean, you either have to like scream and shout or be a problem child or be a brainiac to actually be noticed. And the poor teacher, my mother is a teacher. Oh my God, she struggles with, just grading, emails, and they just keep adding platforms and things to make her life easier. It's just harder because it's too much to handle. What AI can do is take away all of that and allow the educator to focus really on strategic plans and focus on what specific individual students need, whereas the entire program can be managed by AI and allowed to create curriculum and even personalized curriculum per person. But the educator can have that fulfilling role of being a true coach and provide motivation and make sure that the student stays in line and is doing everything they can. So that is one very obvious way that AI can help. But to do that, even the educators need help. We cannot expect an educator to understand what AI is. I barely do, let's just say that. So we need some form of basic, we speak of digital literacy, we can talk about AI literacy or AI fluency. And that's just understanding what AI and generative AI is and how to use it. Not everyone knows how to prompt. You even know what a prompt is? I had no idea until like a month ago. A prompt is basically the question you ask Gen AI to get the answer you need. How you ask the question will determine the outcome of, the language model. So even that is, everyone needs that, and it's basic. It doesn't require having certifications or going through hours and hours of training. It's literally getting, a button in your mind saying, oh, okay, that's how I should ask a question. Sorry.
It's true. No, it's perfect. But I think that this is key to understand that we still don't understand. If we take a look at the results, and I think it's very impressive in terms of the reaction. The main response on our survey was that only to a certain extent. This means that we'll need to understand how AI will impact both job market, both technological developments, and how we can provide the skills that people require to actually access these learning procedures and, of course, then access the job market. But the second one, which I think is also interesting, and my point was better when the numbers were different. There is currently not enough information. So first of all, and a little bit of a conclusion in the middle of the panel, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this. We need to create the conversations so that we provide all the necessary information from all stakeholders so that people can understand the impact of AI and go through it. And of course, the development of AI fluency as an incorporation into curriculums, into basic digital skills training, I think it's a fundamental role to apply. And when we're talking about digital skills, I think that another level that we want to talk about is, of course, the stats show that this digital divide has a bigger impact in those who have or come from socioeconomical backgrounds in a disadvantaged place. So if we take a look at what happened with the digital divide, what digital transformation brought, I think it was a similar phenomenon. The internet came out, all these tools, all these apps that were there to be used. And if we don't address the topic in time, we won't be able to create an inclusive AI revolution that brings people along. So how do you think we can achieve that inclusive movement so that AI is near to those who need it?
Right. So he introduced me as Microsoft. There was a word in there, Microsoft Philanthropies. So I do represent Microsoft Philanthropies, and when you think about the mission of Microsoft to not leave any, to empower every person and organization to achieve more, which is a great corporate slogan. I actually stand by it. It's great. But what we're trying to do, I'm sorry, a corporate
Please
plug.
go for it.
But what we're trying to do is live up to the responsibility that, I mean, if your technology changes the world, you do bear responsibility to ensure that that technology is available to everyone, is used responsibly, and doesn't leave anyone behind, right? So what we're trying to do in Microsoft Philanthropies is really make sure that those people that are being left behind from a socioeconomic status that's not, disfavored or unfavorable, whatever you call it, are taken into account. And we work with nonprofits to really, grassroots nonprofits, to really get into the nitty-gritty and be able to pull those people in and upskill them and ensure that they have the same level of opportunity. It's not an easy task, but it really is a community-first approach that we have. And it will be the same with AI. So we'll work with nonprofits, and what we do is ensure that they not only get tech skills, but also soft skills and survival skills. Let's be honest. I mean, if you're a refugee or immigrant woman who has children and you can't actually go to school, you need daycare, you need all these other things to help you get through life, and then you can consider getting skilling, and then a job. I mean, the equity problem is huge because there's no equal footing for these people. So you really need to make sure that you get them on equal footing, they have the same level of opportunity, and then they can access skilling. So we do that through nonprofits, and we make sure that they have, like I said, tech skills, soft skills, and other types of support on the side. We would do the same with AI fluency, as we call it. So same, provide that. And in the end, to bring it back to the first questions about AI and how it will change the world, the reality is AI will force us to be more human than ever, because we'll need those skills that we mentioned at the beginning of the panel, critical thinking, but others like empathy that we don't talk about enough, that are necessary. A machine could never reproduce that. And those are the skills that will help us use AI as a co-pilot and not let it go on autopilot. Autopilot works for no one. So that's what we need, and those are skills that these people from other socioeconomic backgrounds actually have a lot of, and that's an asset for employers. That's an asset for future jobs, because we need that. Jobs today that we know are needed, like nurses, etc. That's not a job that AI can do. That level of empathy, of critical thinking, of problem solving, let's be honest, nurses are the best problem solvers in the world. They can react to any situation, and yet they have the empathy and the will and the humanity to do it gracefully. I mean, those are the characteristics we should be fostering and valuing. So sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No, that's perfect. And I really feel what you just said about the community approach, because I think that is one of the key areas to address to achieve an inclusive AI revolution. DigiCo works in a community approach with all the members of each community. Some of them are actually present here and accompanying us. And our community is not only represented by training organizations, researchers, but also policymakers that are also present in this room as well to engage with us. And when we bring the topic of AI fluency, when we give relevance to the importance of bringing AI developments into training opportunities to make life easier for all of those who are having it, how can we make them part of the conversation, and how can provide to them as assets to foster a more AI fluency that is focused on the needs of those peoples, and how can we bring policymakers, educators, and everyone that's part of this community as an action plan and as recommendations in your regards that can help this conversation as well?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think we have to be open to dialogue and be very transparent. Like I said, I don't know everything. I'm certainly not a techie. I know that sounds weird, but I'm not. But just being open and having a conversation with every stakeholder group is super important. So when we spoke about community approach, it goes beyond the actual learners or beneficiaries or whatever, or heroes. It goes to actually engaging at that community level and saying, look, we are willing to listen to you. Even in the design of technologies in a big corporation like Microsoft, there is this whole iteration for products and services to make sure that biases are identified in the development of technology, and that they are then corrected for those biases, the tools, etc., and then they're relaunched again. So it's this whole iteration process, and that same thing that applies to technology development, we apply it to our stakeholder relations. Let's talk, and let's tell me what your fears are. And I'm not here to appease your fears, but I'm here to work
Together.
Together. And so when it comes to policymakers, I think we've been very clear about pushing forward principles for governing AI. Microsoft has been one of the few companies that has always pushed for more regulation in tech rather than less. I think other companies, I won't name any, but it's more like, go for it and ask for forgiveness later. And we're kind of like the opposite. And I think it's a legacy from the 90s where, whatever, that happened. But definitely there's working with policymakers to ensure that there's more guardrails for AI, that there's responsible principles for using AI, and not just the technology. When it comes to education, when it comes to skilling, to make sure that we understand and we're working together. We partnered with the EU for the Cyber Skills Academy. We're providing thought leadership. We're providing best practices, and we've committed also to skilling. So it's really that, it's licensed to operate for a big company for sure, to do that, but this is a community where we operate, where we live. I'm part of the community, so you have to do it. And when it comes to reform of education, I think I can have ideas. I don't know if my ideas are valid, but I can definitely bring in some thoughts on how to best support students, learners in general, with technology, because of the best practices we've developed working with community. And one of those things is, nowadays the skills you need, they're evolving, they're volatile. So you can't just, in school you get like this knowledge and you like drink from a hose and it's just like knowledge. You're not actually using it. And if you don't go to school, like refugees or migrants that, are, torn from their home and placed somewhere else, you didn't go to school in the place of in the what do you call it, the host country. So the best approach is to actually have more like experience, real life experience with the skills that you're developing through micro certifications, or just certifications, but that don't require you to have a traditional educational background. And that stuff, best practices that we've collected in the field, working with nonprofits, working with these disadvantaged groups, and that's something that we happily contribute to policymakers and educators. Here, you can do this, or you can provide them with a lab where they can practice their skills, and we'll happily, facilitate that as well. And you need all that dialogue with policymakers and educators and say, well, we can all learn from each other. We definitely are not thought leaders on education, but at the very least, we know what our technology does and how we can best leverage it for the benefit of all.
That's
Sorry,
perfect.
yeah.
Amazing, Gerardo. Thank you so much. I think that we reviewed a lot of topics. I think that we brought a lot of lights to the things that we know, but mainly to the things that we don't know. So we hope that we encourage a lot of questions that you will take along, that you will ask to the people that you know, and that you will foster in your own conversational spaces. There's still a lot to be researched, a lot to be dialogued, and for sure a lot to be legislated around AI. But we know that the impact of AI in the labor market, in the skills development agenda, and in economical and social systems overall is something that came here to stay. So we believe that multi-stakeholder dialogues are fundamental to achieve an inclusive AI revolution. When we apply AI and in the possibility of applying AI into learning experiences, we know that we can bring AI technologies to develop systems that facilitate learning experiences from students, for example, bringing solutions that bridge some disabilities barriers that people may have, or that we can also bring AI fluency into actual curriculums that are present into learning experiences that can provide the skills that people need, how to understand this technology, but also how to use it safely, because there's a lot of dangers when not understanding how this technology can evolve. But one of the things that it came out of the conversation, and I think is very important, this can also bring solutions to educators. Educators can use AI technologies to help students to understand students better, to develop tools that, for example, can approach them and reduce language barriers some students may have, so they can move on with their learning programs. And with all of this in mind, I think that these conversations are exactly what we need to ensure that we don't create an AI divide. And this community approach that we are using here, in which in this event we brought together the public sector, the EU Commission that was present before, we're having a conversation with the private sector, and we will bring third sector and a specialist on basic digital skills. This is a little bit of a spoiler alert on the next panel that's coming. So if we bring all these conversations together and we can actually foster these dialogues between all of us together, we can make sure that this revolution is inclusive, is accessible, and we can narrow the digital divide before it actually cracks wider at this moment. So thank you, Gerardo, for all the amazing light that you brought to this conversation, for all the questions that you brought. And I'm going to lead back to my colleague Lea, who will host the next panel session.
Thanks, everyone.
We are very digital. Both me and Afra, as you can see. Okay, great.
Hello? Hello, hello? I think the mic is... Yeah, you can hear me? Okay, great. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lea Ichikawa. I'm the program manager at Digico, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this panel. So we've just addressed the potential of AI in bridging the digital divide, and actually really like the last point you mentioned about multi-stakeholder dialogue and alliance that we need, because this will be one of the big topics we're going to address today with our three experts. This panel really is about looking at best practices and solutions that we can share together with those experts on reducing basic skills gap and increasing people in Europe who have basic skills. So we'll be discussing, as I said, best practices and look at solution. We'll also have some concrete examples to share to look at solutions at the European, global, and regional level in the Nordic region. So before you introduce yourself, I will shortly reiterate the problem that we're facing. So as we've seen in the first discussion with the European Commission, we know that in Europe, 1 out of 5 adults have low literacy and numeracy skills. This equates to 70 million people. So this is a huge number. On top of this, almost 1 out of 2 adults lack basic digital skills. So again, this is also a huge number. So looking at these numbers, the need to get into training is obvious. Yet an OECD study from 2019 shows exactly that adults with low skills are less likely to participate in adult learning programs as compared to those with mid and high skills. One of the key reasons for this is that adults with low skills find it more difficult to know their learning needs, and because of that, they seek out training opportunities to a lesser extent. So to tackle this issue, both European and global institutions made many commitments, and to name just a few to get us started, the very first principle of the European Pillar of Social Rights is the right to quality and inclusive education, training, and lifelong learning. On top of that, the European Education Arena 2021-2030 commits to making lifelong learning a reality for all. Last but not least, the fourth UN Sustainable Development Goal commits to ensuring affordable and quality training for all people. So, for the three of you who have been working in this field of adult education for a very long time, this is nothing new. Now, the question that we're asking ourselves in this panel is, how do we make these commitments a reality? And I know this is a very broad topic, so to frame this discussion, we will look at three main questions. So in concrete terms, how do we push for an increase of basic skills for European adults? How do we ensure quality, equity, and inclusion in adult learning? And last but not least, as this has been the topic from the start, how do we make sure that digital skills is included in those basic skills training in general? So now we'll start by introductions of the speakers. So Rakat, joining from Toronto, will introduce herself, and then we go in order.
Sorry, I'm guessing that I am live. I can't hear well, Leah. Your mic must be off. Anyways, let me introduce myself. I am Rahat Joldashalieva. I am a team leader of the Quality Learning Ecosystems program at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, which is based in Hamburg, Germany. And I'm happy to be here on the panel with other speakers, and thank you for invitation.
Thank you, Ragat.
Thank you. Yeah, it works? Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Viola Pinzi. I am head of projects in an European NGO based here in Brussels, which is called EIEA, the European Association of Education of Adults. And we are a members-based organization. We have about 120 members across 40 countries, so it's Europe, but a bit beyond as well. And we, let's say, our main goal is to be the voice on non-formal adult education in Europe in particular.
Good afternoon. My name is Andra Carlsen, and I am the head coordinator of the Nordic Network for Adult Learning. It unites all 5 Nordic countries and 3 autonomous areas. And our task is to support the Nordic countries and autonomous regions to implement and develop their lifelong learning strategies, and do it in cooperation, like adding on an extra level to the national policies, national development work. And the governments together prioritize certain areas that they say there is a benefit for developing them together. And basic skills development is one of them, learning from each other, learning from good practices. Also, what was mentioned here, recognition of prior learning, exchanging methods of how to do that, and how to also bring soft skills on the agenda and make them visible. So these are our tasks in the Nordic region.
Thank you. Thank you to the three of you. Just making sure, Rakat, can you hear us? Just so that, can you hear us? Yeah, because you will need to hear the questions as well. So just let me maybe make a sign if you cannot hear us. But I will start with, it's not on. Can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, it should be on. I will start with the first question. First of all, thank you to our 3 speakers for being here today. I'm very happy that you're able to join, and thank you for your time. The first question, and this is really to set the ground for our discussion. So, within the European Year of Skills, we hear a lot that a lifelong learning mindset is needed to prepare adults for the future and solve the adult learning gaps. The Year of Skills is presented as a year that gives a fresh impetus to lifelong learning. I'd like to start with unpacking what lifelong learning means. Most importantly, how does this concept relate to skills training and the targets that were promised by the Year of Skills, as Anna presented earlier? Why is lifelong learning so closely related to basic skills? And on a personal note, what does a lifelong learning mindset mean to you personally? So we will start with Viola.
Okay, just a very, very simple question. How long do we have for that? So I think there is a point that is very important for us at EIEA, and it's very much related to, of course, basic skills and also lifelong learning is a sort of a connection, and is a concept of literacy. So literacy, which is not completely different from skills, but is seen more for a concept related to the why we do something, the reasoning, the logic, knowing about the context and let's say the stakeholders we relate with. So skills in a way for me is more related also to the what and the how, so it's also related to something which can be made of seen more operational or even instrumental. So we really relate the concept of lifelong learning to literacy and to access to literacy for adults, of course, in our cases, through non-formal education. And I think another important point is that we talk here about basic skills, or of course basic digital skills, but within skills there is also a lot of differentiation that we can make. For example, we can talk about technical skills, we can talk about learning about technologies, which is not the same thing. And again, I think this aspect is more related to the literacy concept. So learning why we use a certain technology. So you could say, for example, I can learn how to send an email, but do I know what an email is? Or do I know what different clients for sending emails are out there? And why should I use this? And why should I not send a pigeon? Also, that's very important. And then a third point for me on basic skills is what I wrote before. Mea culpa is learning to learn, in the sense that is also learning with digital technologies is another skills again, and which is also much related to the digital gap on making sure that everyone can also learn with those technologies. So that would be our main focus.
Thank you. Rakat, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much. Similarly, I think we have to also kind of recognize that currently we advocate for a new mindset of culture of lifelong learning that is more fuller and holistic understanding of it, other than the instrumentalist perspective, which actually narrows down and limits our understanding of basic skills, but skills in general. I think one of the important recognition that lifelong learning is connected with, not just with learning to work or new type in the new type of economy or live in new type of society, but it's also about being resilient, learning to learn, as Viola has highlighted, being resilient to the change that are happening, but also taking control over your life and the change that are around you. I think that's what skills help you to do in your everyday life. One of the important things is that the basic skills, the definition of basic skills keeps changing as well as the society and economies are changing. So what we understand today, basic skills or basic digital skills in particular, may not be the same in a few years period, time, because of their speed and the accelerated speed, but also kind of integration of technologies, more advanced technology into our life. And I want to highlight that from the UNESCO perspective is that we look at different levels of work in the area of lifelong learning and basic skills in particular. One of the critical elements is that basic skills are fundamental or foundation for learning throughout life, whether it is about learning new technologies for economy, but also it's about yourself as a human being, and your well-being is as important as the skill that you bring to the economy in your country, for example. So we also highlight here from this perspective humanistic element of basic skills, and that also discusses the concepts of inclusion and equity at the policy and the program level as well. For us, at the personal level, you ask my opinion is about having a lifelong learning mindset is about learning to improve and change and willing to improve and change. And as I said, being resilient. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rakat. Andrea?
Yes, I will start by saying that there are many good things being done, and as you may know, the Nordic region has a long-lasting tradition of investing in lifelong learning, investing in adult education, also being good at taking care of the vulnerable groups, of those who need the most, and designing specific programs. Also ensuring that there is horizontal and vertical mobility in labor market. All these things are very good, but the Nordic countries, like all other countries in Europe and in the world, are also challenged by the speed, by the pace of green transition, of digital transition. We speak here today about digital skill as a basic skill. It's a very new basic skill, and it's even not acknowledged as a basic skill in many different areas of education. So there are challenges, and having said that, at a personal level, learning to learn has been mentioned here a lot, and that still is very important, that people, adults, stay curious about new things, that they want to know, they want to take care of their personal and professional development and try to relate all the new things that come. How does that relate to me? How can I use that, or am I afraid of that? So really this being curious, you mentioned also resilience. Not everyone has the resilience, and not everyone can just throw themselves into the new development and investigate. So there also at a systemic level, we have to think that even if we have the lifelong learning systems, we have to address again the decision makers, policy makers, that the systems should adapt. They should be much more flexible than they have been so far, and they should also be very much aware that the levels of digital competencies today are very diverse. The learners at their very diverse levels, and due to the pace that we experience, the gaps grow very fast. We may even not be aware that they are there. So for the lifelong learning systems, inclusive, but also being alert and being more flexible.
Thank you. Thank you. The point about the system being adaptable, I think, is really, really important. Now, if we look at frameworks, we know how frameworks are crucial, as we've seen in the first discussion with the Commission. We know how they're crucial to build coherence and dialogue, and build really scaffolds that can help stakeholders on the ground build their training programs, etc. Now, basic skills, which is the topic of today, are the minimum competence and knowledge needed for learning, work, and life. Considering this definition from UNESCO, digital skills is indeed part of it, and this is what we are pushing for today in this talk. So today, training someone on literacy and numeracy does not make sense without also training simultaneously on digital literacy. So looking at that wider definition of basic skills, which we're pushing for, with an integration of digital skills, could you share frameworks at your level of governance which addresses this comprehensive definition of basic skills, and how are basic skills addressed in those frameworks? In that same question, I would also like to ask which aspects are not being addressed. What are the shortcomings that you see in the frameworks that you're using in your work? And we'll actually start with a global view with Rakat, which will share about her work at UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Viola. Yes, I think I'll start first and foremost with the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which states ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And I think unlike the previous development goal at the global level, the current SDG education goal explicitly refers to lifelong learning, which allowed us to conceptualize this concept of learning beyond formal schooling and include adults explicitly in the formulation of this goal. In the SDG context, there are two specific targets, target number 4.4 and 4.6, in which basic skills are captured in the formulations. For example, in 4.4 target, it talks about digital skills, and indicator itself is a percentage of youth and adults who have achieved at least a minimum level of proficiency in digital literacy skills. Second one, which is 4.6, focuses on the youth and adult literacy, and from this, the indicator itself talks about this all youth and a substantial proportion of adults, women and men, having achieved literacy and numeracy skills at a specific level. Now, if you look at both of these targets, I think they well capture the skills which we refer to today basic skills, both digital skills at the basic level, but also literacy and numeracy skills, which are conventionally known as basic skills in the previous SDG, previous development goal. And digital literacy is actually today is one of the important skills that we have to incorporate in our policies at the global level, at the agenda, advocacy level. Why? Because without these skills, it's very difficult to even realize lifelong learning opportunities that are available, even if the member states invest in the creation or provision of such opportunities. Now, I would like to actually highlight the second important global framework, which our institute particularly works on. And this is related to the International Conference on Adult Learning and Education, known as Confintia. Last year, we had the 7th conference with the member states. And the outcome document is called Marrakesh Framework for Action. And this Framework for Action actually sets guide for member states for the next 12 years in terms of learning domains, the issues to resolve, policy and programmatic interventions. And of course, at the heart of this framework lies the issue of equity and inclusion, and digital skills actually included in this formulation. I want to highlight that unlike the previous Berlin Framework for Action, which did not necessarily explicitly mention digital skills in the content as a one of the learning domains, the current one, Marrakesh Framework for Action, actually includes it in its formulation, where we discuss about expanded learning domains. Digital skills is separated from literacy skills as one of the explicit themes for member states to consider when they are formulating policies, but also providing the opportunities for learning. I just want to also state to a couple of things. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit more time. Is that according to International Telecommunication Union, 2.7 billion people, which is 1/3 of the global population, still unconnected to the internet, and the majority of them are women. And when we consider the income level of the countries, we see a disadvantage among even greater and divide even greater among women and men, but also generally to global population or global mean. That is, low-income countries have only 21% of women having online access to online, compared to 32% for men. And youth, even though globally they are the driving force in terms of inclusion and equity, and also in terms of digital skills, still in the low-income countries, for example, many of these youth do not necessarily have basic digital skills to even use the opportunities which are available to them. And I think looking at the European Year of Skills as one of the areas was attracting talent from around the world. And I think we need to also consider global context for such initiatives, because if some of the strategies include attracting talent from outside the region. Shortcomings, of course, we continue highlighting the humanistic view of lifelong learning as a UNESCO, and go beyond the instrumentalist perspective of lifelong learning, which oftentimes considers, gets considered skills training for youth and adults, or upskilling youth and adults in certain areas of their skills or competencies to address the demands of the economy and labor market. And I would like to highlight that equally important are the skills, the basic skills that are critical for the individual well-being, community well-being, democracy, and other social aspects of lifelong learning. The last one which I want to highlight is that one of the shortcomings I see in the global frameworks are really having specific targets at the national levels. They may be very aspiring at the global level, but when it comes to the national context, they may not necessarily be reflective. And it puts a lot of pressure on some governments and the member states in achieving these goals, because there is a fiscal capacity of many countries may be limited, and sometimes not even available expertise are there to make sure that these policies are in place and programs are running. So I think that sufficient attention, policy attention at the global level should continue in terms of advocating for such policies and programs, especially for vulnerable populations in those countries. And I think lastly, a more concerning issue, to be honest, is related to the issue of data and evidence. I think despite global indicators that we have for 4.4 and 4.6, we still have issue in terms of monitoring the progress in terms of digital skills and basic digital skills for youth and adults globally at the national level as well. well. And partly it is because countries still have to do more work in terms of framing at the national policy level, also designing programs that respond to the contextual needs and realities as well. And I will thank you so much. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Ragat, for this long answer. But I think all the points were really, really important. Now that we looked at the global frameworks, I'd love to dive into European frameworks with Viola.
Thank you, Rakat and Leah for this. Leah touched upon several points that relate to global education and also to the global framework, how to develop education systems, and of course also the EIA also support the Marrakesh and the work on Confintia. So we have been collaborating on that. So I'd like perhaps to go back to another type of framework that we already mentioned before with Ana Herrero, and it's the competence framework, and perhaps a bit more indeed on the European level, which is my level of expertise as well. So we mentioned before the existence of different competence framework at European level. There is of course the one created, developed by the European Commission and JRC, but there are also other, for example, the one on democratic competencies by the Council of Europe. So there are various, let's say, of this kind of elements or documents that can analyze, describe what kind of competencies. And I think these competence frameworks relate very much to the point of literacy I made before, because they are all tackling various type of basic skills, so basic competencies, not only the DComp, as we know, perhaps we don't, but there are others also, like such as EntreComp, LifeComp, the most recent one, GreenComp, which is very actual as well. I think that all these framework related, all these competence frameworks, so all these frameworks that describe which kind of competencies individuals need at the basic level or more advanced level, but in general, very much, as I said, related to understanding and competence. I think that they are all very useful and very used as well, as Anna mentioned before about DigiComp and the implementation in so many projects already, and also at national level and on more structured initiatives. I think they are great tools when we see them as non-prescriptive models somehow, and we take them indeed as inspirational, we could say, and indeed they can serve the purpose to have, of course, also a sort of coherence, for example, across Europe, on how we build curricula, or how we, for example, with the pilot the Commission is launching on the European Digital Certificate, we try to assess or self-assess these competencies. When it comes to shortcomings on the framework, on competence framework, which are perhaps not shortcomings of the framework themselves, rather on the system, I still find that there is a difficulty to reconcile all these frameworks together, in the sense that, for example, also the framework developed, as you know, we mentioned, focusing on entrepreneurship rather than digital, rather than democratic competence. I see from the point of view of training providers, our members, for example, they are developing what we could say digital literacy or general literacy curricula, and they have these different frameworks, and how in practice I going to implement these all together, let's say in a curricula that is comprehensive. And I'm sort of jumping a bit to something I know we will touch behind. So it's not just about the framework, but it's really about reconciling all of them in practice. And related to that, I think one great challenge still of these frameworks is to continue the work of collecting, sharing, understanding, making a careful work in that sense of the actual practice that I worked with them. Also, the European Commission has published several playbooks or how-to for some of the frameworks in terms of experiences collected in various countries, founded on various programs, and I think that's still the big challenge here, to see, of course, also for example, if you think about non-formal training provider, in many cases they are very small provider, or very, let's say, even most of them are civil society organization, and if I am a training provider and tomorrow I decided to update my citizen curricula, and I have all this interesting work, but how I'm going to implement it is in practice. So this is a bit, I think, the thing that is still a bit, well, a lot of work to do on.
Thank you. And we do see that with the Digicom framework, which we're using for digital skills, it's difficult to implement it on the ground as well. There is a lot of work to be done on operationalization of those frameworks. Antra, I'm turning to you now to share the Nordic perspective on frameworks that includes that comprehensive understanding of basic skills.
Rakat, you started with the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially number 4. I can say that all the SDGs have been an overarching steering framework for the Nordic countries already for several years. But in 2019, all the governments together, all the prime ministers decided that we have to move faster. We have to make these goals work, be operational, understand and really implement them. So they signed the Nordic Vision 2030 in Reykjavik, in the capital of Iceland, in 19, all the prime ministers, and said we have to move faster and we want to be the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030, which is a very ambitious goal. So how to make that a reality is doing that by cooperation, because I come from a Nordic cooperation institution, but that is also calling for different policies and different initiatives working together. That means cross-ministerial cooperation, cross-agency cooperation. And concerning digital competences, there are at least 3 initiatives in this vision, in the action plan. One is about access, and that doesn't mean that there should be a broadband in the ground somewhere. It should also be in every house, and it also should be used, because there are cables everywhere in the Nordic countries, but we still have digitally illiterate population part. So that is one thing. Another one is keeping up the democratic values and the critical use of ICT, which is a combination in addition to access. And then also, of course, what we talk about here is to raise the basic level, to really attract to learning, to different initiatives, those who have the lowest level. So all this in combination is part, for example, in this vision. What are the good things is that there's an action plan, how to make this more concrete and more operational, with 12 different goals. And the action plan is split up from 21 to 24. Then it's being evaluated. There are indicators so that the countries can monitor their own progress in the whole region, and then create the next step of the action plan from 25 to 30. So first evaluate and then create a new edition, revised and so on. What could be the shortcoming in this one? We come from a world of lifelong learning and adult learning, and I can see implicitly that there is a lot of competence development, of course, implied in this framework, because it's talking about green skills, about digital skills, about sustainable region, about competence region. But where are the educators in all that? Where their tasks are there, but I think their competence development could be enhanced more. And this is what we would also like to work for the next period, because what we hear today, the educators have a great potential from artificial intelligence. Do they know how to do that? Are they aware of that? These discussions are not there, at least in adult educated trainers' trainings, or too little. So that, I would say, needs to be focused on more in the next period.
Thank you so much to the 3 of you. I think the topic of educators has come again and again in all 3 sections, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next 2 questions. When we talk about basic adult learning, there is a lot of research and a lot of questioning around who's responsible for that and where should that basic adult learning happen. Should it be in a formal or non-formal educational setting? Should it be at the workplace, outside of the workplace? So all those questions of, actually, we're talking about those frameworks and those definitions, but in reality, where does it happen? So this is my next question is, so Viola, you're representing EAEA, who's representing a lot of organization in non-formal education. So looking at the training of basic skills, which, as we now set out, includes digital skills, could you explain the role of non-formal education in filling up those gaps that formal education face? In other words, what does non-formal education provide that formal education does not, specifically for basic skills training?
Okay, that's another big question. I don't know. I don't know if I will answer fully. Okay, but I will try. So I think as Leah say, we represent non-formal education. Most of the non-formal education provider we represent are also civil society organizations. So we mean that these are organizations that are strongly embedded, strongly linked to the communities, especially, for example, local level. Some of them are national organizations with local branches, but there is, again, this word communities coming. And here I refer to communities really as a community of people or a community that is not just the broad digital community around the globe, but as I say, it could be a local setup or a specific, let's say, group of people. And I think that this is one of the keys on non-formal education, meaning the outreach level. So I think if non-formal education intrinsically focus enough effort, if we have it, of course, in terms of resources, but the intention is there, on really creating outreach strategy and also putting a lot of efforts in actually doing outreach activities, which are sort of preliminary. Anna mentioned this before as well. It's sort of preliminary need. Before you tell someone, okay, I have this course, you could take it, you have to find a person. You have to understand where they are and why they could be motivated to join this kind of training. I'm talking here about adults, large, or no matter, let's say, the background. Because those numbers about the low participation in education are not just because there are fundamental background, socioeconomical, let's say, constraints. And so this is, I think, is the unique role. The focus on outreach and the fact that in non-formal fostering mindset on learning and fostering motivation, intrinsic motivation. And again, I mentioned that again, which is not necessarily instrumental to learn something new for a job or for employability. I think this is a great strength on the richness also non-formal sector, which also means that I think non-formal education has a great value as a bridge. So this level of outreach, the fact that the activities are in general quite accessible and flexible, because the flexibility, the shortness, the fact that are based on the community level also in general allows to be quite user-centered. We were talking with Andra the other day about a basic trivial thing like logistics. I can have a great learning initiative for adults on a Saturday morning in a town, but if there are no buses, no transportation from the local areas to reach it, I've done nothing basically. So it seems trivial, but also that's what also many non-formal education providers focus on. So the real concrete needs of the community. And so that's the logic of the bridge. Once, let's say, someone enters in a mindset of learning, then of course this could be also a way to go forward, if I wish, into a new professional path, into more formal education, or where else, I mean, the sky is the limit, as we say.
Thank you for this positive note. Outreach, as we know in our work in digital inclusion, is the number one issue and challenge, but also power of non-formal education, as you mentioned, and motivation, also a big topic in our work in digital inclusion. Now, when we talk about adult learning settings, workplace or outside of the workplace, that's also another big topic which is researched a lot, talked about a lot. So I'm turning now to Andra. Could you explain the implications of training basic skills at work as compared to outside of work? And I know this is a tricky question, but in your view and from your experience as this regional network, which one delivers the most comprehensive and sustainable outcomes? If you can answer that. Thanks.
Well, the countries don't like to be compared. They like to follow each other, but they would not say this is better than the other one. And really, in the Nordic region, the countries choose different strategies and test different methods of doing that. But the key, maybe the main key word would be partnerships and cooperation among sectors, formal and non-formal, workplace, non-formal providers. So trying to create partnerships because they have their specific competencies. They have their specific best practices that they can use. And when they are combined, there could be some new and better outcomes. And with that, I would like just to enhance what you said. The non-formal education tradition is very long-lasting in the Nordic countries, and they really can have developed mindsets, methodologies of how to get hold of those people who are not in learning settings or for some reason don't want to join. That was a long introduction, sorry for that, but an example about workplace learning which is very successful. In Norway it's called Skills Plus program, and it's a governmental funding program which provides funding for a combination of stakeholders. It should be a workplace and an education provider, and preferably a non-formal education provider. Why? Because in more than 90% of workplaces are small and medium-sized enterprises. They don't have big departments that can provide training. So the workplace needs to ally with a training provider, and non-formal education or voluntary organizations are those who can get hold of the people and have methods for raising their motivation, not only for basic skills, but in general for learning. So having said that, the basic skills training, all the training sessions are very much related to the concrete work that the person is doing. So the person hears that you don't have basic skills or you lack basic skills. No, you need this and that for your work. So it's a different approach of saying that you can improve your situation in this workplace, or you can move on if you get your level higher up. And the program is divided so that those people who are employed, they work and study partly at work time and partly also in their free time. So it's also investment of your own time. And then it's in non-formal education settings. And then the main goal is to motivate the learner for further learning. So you get something for your work directly, and you get the motivation maybe to explore and do more. So that's the example from Norway. And there is, of course, also specific tools that describe the basic skills related to different occupations. It's very much technical, I won't go to that, but that supports both the employer to see what type of skills they would need, and it also helps to design the programs. And very shortly, another example is from Finland. As you may know, Finland scores very high in different international surveys, but still they also have the same problem that not all the population is digitally included and active. And especially Finland focuses a lot on immigrants and newcomers. They got two big groups, one coming in 15 and one coming now in the 21, 22. And they really think how to get everyone in education and learning after the first official integration training is finished, because that's offered by the government, and then you are kind of left on your own. We heard that you have families. For different reasons, not all people do get the minimum skills in that program, so the government has invested many million euros and given it to non-formal education to provide supporting education so that immigrants can get up to level that they could apply for a job, or they could go further to some kind of training that would bring them, and digital skills and language skills in combination in those programs.
Thank you so much to the three of you, and I'm glad you mentioned this program in Finland, because the next question is about enablers for ensuring equity and inclusion when looking specifically at disadvantaged groups. So I'm gonna mix the last that question and the last one with example, because we're running out of time. So my question is, so the key topic throughout has been that why is within basic skills training, why do we need to put equity and inclusion so much at the front? And so I'd love to hear what are some enablers for you at your level of governance on making sure that basic skills training cater for and truly considers the needs of individuals in vulnerable situations, for them to have a successful training on basic skills. Can you share some best practices from your experience, and as well some examples, if you could mention some, so that we cater for the two questions. So I will start with Rakat first with the global level.
Thank you so much, Liam. I think as discussed from the very beginning of this event, but also during this panel specifically, I think at the global level, enabling factors will remain really having basic skills high on the agenda of discussion and advocacy with member states, for example, at the UN level, having really at the outset equity and inclusion in mind, not as an additional or needing special type of explanation later as a footnote. I think that's what critical for us, and it's we have already examples which have been shared, for example, which Andra has referred to, Nordic Vision 2030, which already has these elements formulated and explicitly stated in the targets as well as goals. And I think another thing which I would like to highlight is really having high on the global agenda, policy agenda, means also the member states will take these discussions a little bit seriously when it comes to contextualization of these in their own countries. And that sometimes also affect on their decision on funding, financing such training and as well as offers for the disadvantaged groups. I would like to highlight the role of partnerships just across all the sectors, but also within the education sector as well. I think I would like to highlight one of the examples here is the global initiative that came to exist during COVID-19 pandemic, and which UNESCO initiated when we had the global level lockdowns and most of the schools and all the educational institutions were closed. So during that, Global Education Coalition became as one of the platforms where many partners have joined, not just tech company, ministries of education and media, and many other agencies including the universities as well, academic institutions that had a focus on equity as well as inclusion, because the purpose of it really sharing the know-how, but also technologies with one another wherever it is needed, most particularly, for example, and investing in such places so that we address some of the issues, not all, but some of the issues that actually was posed because of the pandemic. And many tech companies have also joined this coalition, and some contributed devices and online educational products for free. Some of them even helped connect the communities which were not connected during this period. And I think this spirit of solidarity should continue beyond the pandemic, and we should highlight and capitalize on such experience that we had at the global level. One of the important things I would like to also recognize, maybe emphasize a little bit on this panel, is that it's us, which are agencies which have this humanistic philosophy in our minds and in our mission and vision of our institutions. We need to educate industries, including tech industries, to contribute to more inclusive and sustainable societies. I think it benefits all. We need to question whether our policies and programs are inclusive and equitable, whether they recognize the needs of the specific marginalized people and communities within our countries and across our countries, particularly women, elderly, migrant populations, people with special needs. All of these require our attention when formulating the policies and having targets, specific targets dedicated for that. But when we are collecting, for example, data and evidence, we need to have disaggregated data, because currently we have very little information oftentimes, and then that's one of the reasons policies are not necessarily based on the evidences, and then it impacts the kind of decisions on the financing and funding issues, but also in terms of provision of high quality, high impact programs for the most needed in our communities. And I think with that, I also want to highlight a couple of enablers, which I think both Viola and Antra has highlighted. One is outreach, definitely by the government's outreach and providers' outreach, provision, expand the provision, have all these flexible opportunities for learning for everyone, and support those who need more in order to avail such opportunities. And that's where we talked a little bit about the motivation of individuals, but also I would highlight a relevance of such learning which are available. For example, oftentimes we see opportunities available out there, but they may need the skills which will be helpful for them to acquire such training opportunities. I think I just want to highlight that we should be cognizant of the fact that I think earlier on discussed that there are some people who may need even more support at the beginning to avail such opportunities, even if they are available.
Thank you so much. So We are already running out of time, so maybe just 2 words from Antra and Viola, just 2 sentences to close this panel on enablers, on what you think are the most important to focus on if we want those two, if we want basic skills training to be really inclusive of marginalized groups. Just 2 words, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can be very brief. I think I will repeat again, bring the training to the people and not the people to the training, and just allow me a bit of a slogan at the end. And I think another point that we touched before, which is trying to design programs which are interlinking competencies and skills in a holistic perspective, such as, for example, Life Skill for Euro project, and I can mention, for example, in UK there is a great example. It's called the Citizen Curriculum. So something really that is not necessarily fragmenting by type of skills, but it allows a general sense of literacy in a holistic way.
Thank you.
If only 2 words, then I would say co-creation and listening to learners' needs. But I would like to expand a bit on that, because the Nordic governments commissioned a research study looking at 40 different policy and practice initiatives across all the countries, and the goal was how to improve the existing basic skills trainings and not to create new and new and new, but how to improve them. And there comes the co-creation and listening to learners' needs. And for the policy makers, the main recommendation was that we should move away from focusing on citizens, as learners, as an issue, as a problem, but using them as a resource when creating new initiatives. Also, for the policy makers, not looking for specific digital challenges or problems or situations, but acknowledging that digitalization is everywhere. It's across us. It's in work, it's in daily life, and so on. So these are, and for the providers, what was said, creating programs for citizens, for learners, instead of involving and pressing learners into specific ready-made programs, but involving them. And this may seem very trivial, but both for policy making and practice, using the learner's voice in order to make these small changes. We're not there yet, so that's our goal.
Thank you so much for the 3 of you. Now it's my turn to summarize in 3 words everything we discussed. So if we had to remember 3 points from this whole event, actually, not just this panel, the first 2 parts really looked at changing the narrative from skills as instrumental to lifelong learning. And so using the values that lifelong learning advocates for to look at this European Year of Skills in a holistic way, in a comprehensive way, and not just look at labor market needs, but also look at skills and training as beneficial for the individual, for individual development and community development. So that's the first point. The second point really is about dialogue and dialogue between stakeholders, between educators, between industries, between the public sector as well. And I think we reiterated that many times in the 3 sections. And last but not least, and I think for me this is actually personally the most important one, is co-creation. To make basic skills training work for people from a marginalized background, we need to co-create and not just deliver training that's already done without them, but make them as an active process. I know this is a topic that we've touched upon a lot, but for me, if there was one word to end, it's co-creation, to really include and not just in words but in action people who are the furthest away from learning. So thanks so much for everyone for joining, to our speakers as well. We were super happy to have you, and we'll see you in the networking instance right there. Thank you.